Oh my God, I learned how to turn it down. That's so exciting. What a victory in the live streaming world. Welcome, everybody, to the Stoned Fruit Roll-Up. I am your host, Rebecca Gunter, and we are here live on YouTube at the Stoned Fruit channel, at Stoned Fruit, Stoned, Fruit, and also on my personal LinkedIn page. Hey, y'all. And this is our weekly live show. It is the show you're watching about building the show you're watching right now. We spent the last year or so just painstakingly documenting our journey to build an interesting and compelling live show. And I'd love to hear in the comments where we've nailed it and where we failed it. Oh my God, I just wrote that copy in real time. And welcome friends, family, comrades, colleagues, creative people to the Stoned Fruit Roll-Up. Today is super exciting for me because it's one of my absolute favorite pieces of content to put out there in the zeitgeist, which is live coaching. Live coaching is so exciting because it's like for real, legit, risky to just kind of turn on your camera, invite a person that you either know very well or don't know at all, or anywhere in between, to really dig deep and have a quality conversation about their business in a way that when the work is done is actually kind of like a little vulnerable. You've got to, as the person on the other side of live coaching, kind of show up with your big girl panties on, as they say, and be ready to have conversations that may expose some of the, gaps you might have in your marketing, or confusion or questions you have as an entrepreneur, or as you're approaching your branding or your marketing. And so, like, big ups and mad chops to my guest, Melina, today, who is my cohort in the Rise Together Mastermind by our girl, Gill Moakes. So on Monday, when we were having our accountability right together session, I asked my friends in the group that my guest for this week had fallen ill. Feel better, Jody. And would anybody like to come on and do some live coaching? So I'm really, really excited to get to know better Melina Cordero, because she is someone who I'm tangentially kind of connected with through this mastermind, but I haven't had a chance to really get to know her and get a feel for her vibe. So that also sets the stage for an awesome show today, because we're going to be writing a positioning statement, kind of real and in real time, based on what I learn about Melina and her business today. Intentionally, by design, I have just very little ideas. I have very little context or understanding about her or her business. I don't go deep into the website. I don't dive into her LinkedIn profile. I don't sniff around and do a bunch of industry research, because I really think that the best way, or the very best outcome from doing the work of positioning and messaging, is when you have an absolute blank slate and you don't come to the table presupposed with ideas or copy someone else's written, and you really kind of get to this original source of like primary research, and through deep investigative discovery that is a little bit organic, and again, is a tremendously kind of real and authentic, can be a raw experience. We try and unpack what kind of brand is actually kind of like living at the heart of this, and how can we articulate it in words, actions, and images. And that is branding. So one of my favorite things to do, I learned how to do this work way back in the way back times, and doing positioning workshops or working with people on who are their people, what do they need, who are we, what do we deliver, why are we special, different, or the one, is some of my absolute favorite thing to do. So without further ado, because we really only have now 55 more minutes to get to know Melina and see what's up over there in this powerhouse of entrepreneurship, because if Melina has questions, then I guarantee somebody else out there does too. And I think the more we share the kind of work, how the sausage is made in brand building, the better we all are. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage my good colleague, Melina Cordero.
Hello.
Hey girl, hey.
I don't hear a ton of applause right now, but I'm just going to imagine that it's out there.
if we had awesome soundtrack like our colleague Renee Hastings, who plays this like balloon drop whenever the guests come out there, like you're really blushing, like, oh my God. We need to up our game in that department and take a page out of her book. But know that the applause is absolute and real, and there are at least some diehard Melina fans here in the comments and also online to watch you kind of have fun with this exercise and get the you time that you absolutely deserve.
Live you time. Sounds great.
You time on the YouTubes. All right. So, Melina, share with it, like, I set us up with a story of like, here we are on Monday and I'm on the Zoom with a bunch of other ladies and be like, hey, my guest can't make it. She's really sick. Is anybody interested in kind of coming on and doing some live coaching? Your hand was in the air before, like, zip, zip. What was it that attracted you to this opportunity, or why were you willing to kind of go there with me?
Well, first of all, I always like supporting my friends and fellow lady entrepreneurs. So, I mean, that's first and foremost. I think second, for me, I've discovered and realized and starting to accept that visibility is important. And I would say the third reason is because since I left my big corporate job and branched off on my own almost 3 years ago now, I get a lot of people who are in a similar position that are maybe working for a big company and thinking about branching out, but are really intimidated by the process of what it means to be on your own or start a business. And so I spent a lot of time trying to offer really transparent feedback and experience and all that. And so I think it's really helpful to share our stories and the, how the sausage gets made. I mean, I'm pescatarian, but I'm happy to talk about how sausages get made.
These are mushroom sausages. Okay. That's what these are.
They're beyond sausages. Yeah.
And broccoli Rob. We're making,
there we go.
Yeah. We're making Del Monte sausages. I'm making that up.
Sounds
yeah. That's such a wonderful share, though, Melina. I think that the lion's share of entrepreneurial start, the entrepreneurial angst is around not necessarily, I see a problem, I have an innovative way to approach it, I'm business oriented, I can't wait to just kind of get out there and get chomp at the bit to innovate the industry and and provide services. I think that's rare. I think what's really more common is corporate defectors and people who are leaving, bad bosses, kind of toxic culture, just a really soul-sucking experience in kind of the 9 to 5 or the paycheck world. And so we run kicking and screaming to the wonders and the joys of the internet, which have allowed you to be able to kind of self-direct and self-educate yourself into a specialty and kind of skip the corporate ladder, go straight to the C-suite with products and services. But it is, I think we should acknowledge that that's not an easy transition. Those are kind of two different worlds, and that's it's hard. So
yeah, really overwhelming. And I think especially for a lot of people who are in a place of high stress or burnout in corporate culture and corporate environment, it's just so overwhelming to look at the internet and see all of these. This is what you need to do, and this is how you do it. It's a lot.
Well, Entrepreneur Inc., I think, is a real industry. I think there is a kind of a there's a place where they're kind of feeding on that angst and keeping people spinning their wheels a little bit through just should. And also, there's no formula, so it's we're looking for one. Sure would be nice. Like when you go to college, and you sign up and you get your books and you go to classes and you get a certain amount of credits and you pass the class by showing up and doing the homework. Like it's pretty much guaranteed you're going to get your degree at the end. Yeah. Entrepreneurship, you can grind for 20 years and still be like, Roop.
Yeah, and there's this idea of like, oh, I want to build a business, but a business isn't something you get to and then it's done. Like a business is just this constantly evolving thing. You don't like get to it and then you did it. It's a baby. It's a human.
I wish we could get to it and then it would be done. Although, I guess you could buy like something that's already established. But for folks like you and me who are out here just kind of starting a scrappy, like I'm going to do it my way, God damn it, then It's definitely an uphill battle.
Yes.
I'd like you to know that we've got a few friends here in the comments. Kathleen is coming in from Canada, and Tony is here from Silver Spring, Maryland, and he has a question about pescatarian sausages. He'd like to know if a fish sausage could be a thing, or is he just trying too hard to make fish sausage happen? What do you think, Melina?
I feel like I need to do some Wikipediaing because I don't know if the term sausage refers to the process, or if it's like like champagne is, you can only call it champagne if it's from Champagne region of France. Like it's sausage. I don't know.
Sausage.
Sausage. That's definitely not how you say sausage in French, and I'm a French major, so I have to say that. But
Tony, stop trying to make poisson sausage a thing. All right, without further ado, let's get into it because I want to make sure you have your you time, and I'm going to take a minute to kind of get warmed up and through this questions, and ideally I'd love to have something concrete at the end of this call, so let's go for it. Are you ready? All right, Melina. So all I know so far, and I'll be taking notes, so that's what I've got kind of off to the side. I've got my trusted purple Sharpie. What I know is that you are kind of amongst this kind of corporate defector swath of wonderful entrepreneurs that I described earlier. And I'd like to know, like, what is it that you did inspire to, like, I can do this better. I'm going to do it my way. Maybe tell me a story when you recognized that the way we've always been doing it was a little effed up and you had a better solution.
Yeah, that's an easy one. So I worked in commercial real estate for just over 10 years, my whole career. And I joke that I accidentally fell into that area. And then I accidentally fell up the corporate ladder and was kind of climbing. And, it always seemed off to me. It never really felt easy, even though I kept rising. And it just didn't feel like a good fit for me. But I always thought that it was me. And the way that things were done, I thought were inefficient. And also it was just, it was a different culture, corporate culture, didn't really fit with me. And I was constantly adjusting myself and my approach and my, everything to sort of fit in. And I always looked at myself as sort of the thing that was a little broken and needing to constantly change and develop to succeed. But it was the pandemic that really changed that for me. Because for the first time, we were all grounded. All of a sudden, we're on Zoom all the time, and I was in an environment where luckily we were able to work remotely, and we started to get this window into each other's lives. It was a bit more intimate than we had been before, and I started really seeing the differences between what I would say is my women and colleagues of color, my female colleagues, my colleagues of color, anyone who was sort of underrepresented in our industry, the difference between their experience and my male colleagues, especially my white male colleagues. And it really struck me what I was seeing happen after, as Black Lives Matter really came to the fore, and we saw a lot of that movement happening. And I'm based in Washington, D.C., so it was very, very present for me. And I was watching how companies were responding to this. And I think that was the first time where I was like, no, we're not the problem here. And I said, this is never going to work, these ideas. And I realized we need better ideas. We need better ways. And it's not the reason I'm not fully happy here and feeling fulfilled isn't because I haven't done it right or I'm broken. It's because the way that we've been doing things and the way that we've built these environments and these systems and these practices is not really inclusive, and it's not actually that innovative. And that realization for me over the course of the pandemic, sitting in my living room or my home office, where I had no other distractions because I was in quarantine, as we all were, and that really just kind of made it all make sense to me. And I think that realization gave me the courage and the energy, I would say, to go, no, I can do this better. We can do this better.
Melina, when you say that the way we built these environments isn't conducive or healthy, who's we?
We are humans, but in particular, men. And that is not to say that men are bad and men did everything wrong, but it's to say that the way that we do most things at work, the way that systems have been built, institutions have been built, were built by majority men, right? Because it was at a time when they were the only ones included. And so in the construction of our processes and our systems and our things, there are a lot of voices that were left out and that aren't included. And so now I think if we really want to create systems and workplaces and organizations that work and work well, we have to integrate more voices.
I could not agree more about integrating more voices and also fixing what was not built for anybody other than kind of a small subset of people. So how are you personally affecting that change? Like who's the locus or who's the center of your work? Like who is it that you hope will your stuff will impact, and what change do you hope will happen?
So I work with organizations, I speak to leaders. So my goal, and I'll give a little bit of context to this, right? So I was working in an industry that was primarily male. Most of my peers, most people who are in a leadership position, are white men, older, right? Say Gen X or boomers.
My girl Michelle would say stale, pale, and male.
And it's funny because I went to Yale, so it's stale, male, pale, and Yale. And it's very funny. It's our joke. So I worked with them. Those are the people I work with. And in the beginning, I was like, these guys don't know. What are they doing? What are they thinking? They're not thinking. And over time, I realized, no, they're not bad people. They just don't know. And I developed a lot more empathy and understanding through working with people who are really different than me, right? Older white men. And I should say my father is Puerto Rican, so I grew up in a bicultural household. So I do have light skin, but I grew up in a household that's not fully white, I would say. So I have a little bit of sensitivity.
You have you got your street cred, is that what you're saying?
A little bit of street cred, but a lot of the privileges of having lighter skin that I will never deny, right? That's a whole other conversation. But
hashtag colors for sure.
Exactly. So that experience in working with so many men and realizing that there's this just huge gap in knowledge, and it's sure some people are not willing to do the work and are not interested in doing the work and doing better and learning more. But I would say that the vast majority are open and curious and want to be better. But there's a severe lack of approachable, accessible tools, resources, and insights that make it easy for them to learn. And we can sit here and say that, well, they should be making the effort. It doesn't matter if it's easy or not, they should do it. Sure. But I'm also very practical. I'm very logical. I'm a realist. I come from a corporate environment. And if we want to make the change, let's make it easy for them. That's so my audience, to answer your question, a lot of times I am working with male leaders who, and males in general, people in general, who want to be better, want to be more inclusive, want to be more aware, but have a lack of spaces and places and people where they can go and feel safe and comfortable learning, asking questions, admitting they don't know something. So a lot of my work revolves around making this idea of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and teaching about inclusive leadership and equipping organizations to equip their people with these tools, making the work approachable.
I think that your work is extra hard. I think that the way that men are socialized in a hierarchy makes it very, very uncomfortable for anyone to say, one, I'm here to learn, or two, maybe I've made mistakes. I think the shame spiral is real. And am I safe here? I think that a man can generally be afraid that they will be laughed at or made fun of or perceived in a way that's unfavorable when you've really been taught to navigate the world with this jockey for position. So to admit that and to open up takes a lot of courage. So how do you do that?
Well, I don't expect them to admit that and open up. I think that's number one. What I'm doing is inviting them to learn, creating a space for them to learn. I would love it if we could all just hold hands and admit where we're wrong and where we're not good at things and get super vulnerable. But I don't think we need to do that to generate progress. And so a lot of times, I'll give you an example. I'll be doing a workshop or a presentation on something around DEI. And it's funny because I'll look, and if you have a mixed room, right? So there's mixed gender, mixed race, things like that. The white men will typically sit in the back. So come to expect that, and that's fine. Because they're uncomfortable. And I'm generalizing here. Not everyone is, right? But what's interesting is they stay quiet, but I don't call them out. And I don't say, what do you think? And tell me this, because that would make them a lot of times uncomfortable. But what happens afterwards is they come up to me and they ask me a question, or they email me after and they say, hey, thanks. You really made me think. And I was thinking about this after. That's progress, right? And so that's what I mean by when I think about meeting people where they are. Everyone's at this different place in our DEI journey. And I see my role as coming to you. And if you are interested and open to being better and getting better and learning something, that I will come to you. I will make that effort to come to you and bring you a little bit forward. Hopefully a lot of it forward. But that's my sort of promise or compromise and commitment to people, leaders.
Well, what are they buying from you?
So there are
what's for sale?
This is what's for sale. So as I mentioned, I work with organizations. So I'm selling into organizations, but I feel like I'm really speaking to leaders. And leaders are usually the ones that are engaging me in the organization, right? So I sell three things, or three sort of products that I sell. One is what's called a culture audit. So a lot of times leaders realize that there may be something a little bit broken or off in their culture. It doesn't feel right. You're having a retention issue. Or you're getting demand to do more DEI, but you're not really sure where to start, how to do it. So a culture audit is a great way of coming in, doing a survey. I engage in one-on-one conversations with people across the organization, and then I come back with the insights around. This is what I found. It's an objective third party that can act as that sort of intermediary, taking what your people feel and think and translating it to you as a leadership team and saying, here's what I recommend. Here's based on my conversations with your people, the data from the survey, and my expertise in leadership and organizations and inclusion. Here's what I recommend you do. And always making those quite practical, right? So it's not just huge, big changes. So that's offer one.
And then what about the implementation?
So implementation, I do not do. It depends. So there are certain parts of implementation I do and certain ones I don't. So I'll give you an example. I was working with an organization recently where one of my recommendations was, you need to hire a part-time or a fractional HR person. That's not me, but I don't just leave them and say, figure it out. I will recommend a few services, things like that. But it's important I do give recommendations. So I don't just say, here are your problems, here are your strengths, figure it out. It is very much like, okay, I recommend changing the structure of your monthly staff meeting because people are feeling excluded from that conversation. I recommend running a survey once a year. Here are the questions you can use. So it's recommendations, but with very specific things and ideas and concepts. That's the first service offering or product. And I've made that super accessible. I love doing that because I get to talk to people and it's great. The second thing.
Before you go on to that, Melina, let's tell the people at home where they can find you to get this audit. How would they get started in contacting you? Let's just say in a perfect world that someone out there is like, oh my God, a culture audit. I've been waiting. How would they get you?
So you go to my website, melinacordero.com, and under the services portion, there's going to be something on the front page, but also under the services portion, what you'll see there is my 3 services spelled out really simply with a link to sort of learn more, or contact me to schedule a call to just talk through it and what might that look like for your organization, how big is your organization, that kind of thing. And I will mention that I have priced this one low. I wanted this to be very accessible to organizations, whether you have 20 people or 20,000 people, because I think this information is really important for you to be able to know what to do when it comes to DEI and leadership, rather than just, you need to do DEI, or you want to support your leaders, but just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it works is not a good strategy. So that's why this is meant to give you data points and direction for your strategy.
I'm quasi fascinated with this idea, so I really want to go down a rabbit hole a little bit with you. How do you do this work? Do you show up and you're like immersive and on the company for 5 weeks, like kind of behind your clipboard? Do you like look at their reviews on Glassdoor and interview former employees? Like, how do you actually do a culture audit, and what does it mean to you?
It's really interesting. It's a great question. And similar to how you described, your work with this kind of session, I'm not doing too much research on it beforehand. I like to come at it with a blank slate. So the first conversations I have are with the leadership team. I want your leadership team, you've engaged me because you have a problem or you have an ambition for your organization. I want to hear from you what that is. What do you think the strengths are? What's the feedback you've gotten? What do you think are the weaknesses? What are your objectives as a company as well? So it's not just about the traditional things we consider DEI, right? It's about, okay, you have a retention issue. So you've noticed your retention, your quit rate has gone up. People are leaving. You're not able to retain people, or you're having trouble hiring, or you're having trouble finding diversity, et cetera, et cetera. It's important for me to understand the wide range of your strategic and operational challenges. And so a lot of times I will ask for any sort of, annual or 5-year strategic plan that you have, so I can understand the company's objectives from a business sense. Because any recommendations I make around your people also need to relate back and feedback to your business objectives. Otherwise, you're not going to have very much incentive to do anything about it. So me coming from the business world, that's really important to me. The DEI and people topics need to be seen as integrated with the business. Otherwise, it's just a nice to have.
It's a luxury. And I think that's really the struggle with even language around DEI. Writing website copy for 2 different DEI consultants were probably the hardest projects I've ever done.
Yeah.
Because everything that would kind of naturally flow into my brain is through the lens of white supremacy, like for real. And so, when I would write like, why is diversity and inclusion important? I would be like, bring everyone to invite people in. Like it was really hard to deconstruct the dominant culture. And I think that corporate culture is very much aligned with the pillars of white supremacy, frankly. And so the things that are wrong there are so intrinsically imbued in our culture. It's really, really hard to recognize when you have a bias and what to do about it. So it's like really hard. So I'm really sympathized.
Very hard. It's very hard. And the wording, so 2 things about words in this space. One is that they're constantly evolving, right? So it's constantly changing. What's the right term? Is it Hispanic? Is it Latinx? Is it Latino, Latina? Like that's always changing. So it's always evolving. So it's hard to write copy. And number 2 is there more and more trigger words, what I call them trigger words, emotionally charged, or words that trigger an emotional response. It's the second you say white supremacy, the second you say privilege, the second you say race, it's become really charged and people close up physically.
Girl, we've said we've been like white supremacy, patriarchy, how men are conditioned, hierarchy. Like we've said a lot here. So let the algorithm gods bring their mighty hammers down, because I think this should be a safe space to be able to normalize you talking like that.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm of 2 minds with it. I'm of 1 mind with nuance, I would say. We should be able to talk about these words and call things what they are and see it like it is. And at the same time, I think that the words and the terms are so misunderstood by so many people that it causes this automatic response based on, things that have happened around those words. And so I sympathize with that and I empathize with that. And a lot of times there are certain words I won't use with certain audiences because I don't want them to shut down. That doesn't mean I don't talk about the concept. I can talk about the concept that, okay, the way that I framed it in the beginning, that our workplaces were built and structured only using the perspectives of certain groups. And so now we need to integrate other voices in groups. By saying that, I'm essentially talking about white supremacy, but I've stripped away the trigger words and I'm trying to explain to you the concept and the purpose, right? In a way that you can understand and that's not ladled with acronyms. And this is a bigger issue in corporate culture in general. I mean, acronyms, business, open the kimono, this and that. Like all of that is actually technically exclusionary language.
Mm-hmm.
So just break it down and say what we're doing. So a lot of times, yes, I talk about DEI. It's what I do. It's a keyword. It's SEO optimized. But what I'm doing is helping people be better leaders. And I'm helping shape workplaces where everyone feels like they can thrive. That's it.
If you had a magic wand to shape workplaces so that everyone can thrive, what would you change?
We don't have enough time for that, Rebecca.
Oh no, this is it. This is what we've been trying to get to the entire time.
I would, I think really it's around inclusion. I would, one of the things I'm always telling leaders is you need to talk to your people. You need to hear your people more. You need to ask your people more. So yeah, go hire a consultant and pay the big bucks and do all the things, but have conversations. We need to have more exchange between people of different levels, of different races, of different, and it's, I think a lot of the brokenness of the workplace is the fact that so many of us are uncomfortable.
Asking uncomfortable questions, which is your thing. That I do know. That is your thing.
One of my things, yes.
Asking uncomfortable questions. I've got a little thing on my Substack for anybody who's signed up for that newsletter with a beautiful conversation around disability. I think you'd really love, Melina. And the point of all of it was, if we don't actually have these conversations, nothing will really ever be great for the people who need it. Yeah. And how do you have those kind of conversations when fear is so front facing? In this conversation, it's my girl Jennifer Thornton over at 304 Coaching had a beautiful podcast episode with another colleague of ours who's woke up one day simply septic and was suddenly a quadruple amputee. Wow. And her conversation around what happened when she went back to work in an office where no one had any sort of visible disability. Let's acknowledge one in four workers are actually struggling with that. And it's beautiful about how to have that conversation. So I encourage folks to listen to that episode. We'll put it in the show notes. Maybe explore the article I wrote about it on the Substack, and I'll make sure that you get a chance to see that too, Melina, because it moved me beyond measure, not just in like what a heartwarming story, but also like, yes, let's just have tough talk. Let's just do that.
Yeah. And I want to be able to say, like, here's a good example. I want to be able to say, and by me, I mean like anyone, be able to come in and say, hey, it's really hard being a woman in this environment. And I feel excluded or marginalized or XYZ, like it's tough. And I want to be able to say that. I want people to be able to say that without it being interpreted or felt like what I'm actually saying is men are the worst, or you're excluding me, or you're a bad leader, because that's not what we're saying a lot of the times or feeling, right? And so I think there's no space for that conversation.
And I think there's also no space for that conversation perpetuates the toxicity of it, because I think that there's a real empathy gap sometimes for folks who are not experiencing marginalization in the workplace or at the society at large, to understand how prolific the microaggressions are, to understand how rampant just like sexist talk is, or, again, exclusionary language that kind of, because no one talks about it, then when it does come up or blows up in a news story or becomes a PR nightmare, the well-intended men in my life can sometimes be like, this is shocking. It kind of came out of nowhere. And the women in my life are like, So if no one is really talking about it, then I think it does perpetuate.
And I want to normalize what you just described. I want to normalize and make it okay for anybody to be able to say, oh my goodness, I did not know that. Thank you for telling me that. Or, oh, wow, I've been using this term for years and I had no idea that it made people feel that way. Thank you for telling me. Like, I want to normalize that because that's how we should all be. That happens to me all the time. And I'm a quote unquote DEI expert, right? I was speaking with a grief expert a couple of months ago about how leaders can handle grief inclusively in the workplace. And I used the phrase committing suicide. And she corrected me. And she said, actually, Melina, that phrase can harm people, and this is actually the root of that phrase. It's rooted in an old idea that committing suicide is like committing a crime, and that's why he's committed. So actually, we don't use that term in this space anymore. We say took his own life or da da da. And I said, wow, I had no idea, never heard of that. Thank you so much for telling me. I really didn't know. That is how these conversations should go. And it's not me getting defensive and feeling like I offended somebody and it was bad. And it wasn't her saying, you dumb. Why'd you say that? At all.
Well, I mean, we all need to be educated. Again, to your earlier point of the words are constantly changing. And then to be accepting that somebody could actually kind of change that. And I'll also just add a little bit, that's my own opinion, that's also around white supremacy and the right to comfort. I don't want to have to learn a new term. Yeah. I've been using this. I don't want to have to learn pronouns. I don't want to have to give up a cultural appropriation because it's my favorite joke. And I don't even mean like horrible racist jokes, but maybe saying, some things that probably aren't really cool anymore, dude. Yeah. But that right to comfort of like, I don't want to have to change how I like to roll. It's just I'd like a frictionless existence. And I'm sorry that that's like not even a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's what I mean by wanting to make workplaces comfortable for everyone. I want it to be comfortable for everyone. Right. And I want people who have traditionally felt excluded or uncomfortable because they have to code switch and do all these things, in the workplace. I want them to feel comfortable, but I also want white men to feel comfortable learning and growing and being comfortable with the fact that, there's a new demographic. It's changing. So I think a lot of my mission has been about making this work accessible and approachable. So it's really, really important to me for everybody.
I want to kind of get into normalizing, making it comfortable. But before I do, Tony has a really good question, and I want to make sure that gets addressed here. Yeah. He says that there's been a bit of a pendulum swing backwards in DEI following a Supreme Court ruling, leaders coming out against DEI legislation, Lululemon, etc. Continuing on with, how is this pendulum swing impacting you, the work you do, and how you communicate with clients? And I would just like to thank Tony for using the Oxford comma, of which we often disagree.
I appreciate the Oxford comma. I'm an Oxford comma fan. So this is a really common question that I've been getting, and I think there's a lot of noise in the media about it too, right? This sort of pushback on DEI or fallback in DEI. Here's the deal. It goes back to what I talked about with words. Like, words are constantly changing. And if you dig into the affirmative action ruling from the Supreme Court, and I actually recorded a video exactly about this on my YouTube channel and the Uncomfortable Questions Project, that's specifically about, what does the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action in higher education mean for the workplace and DEI? Now, if you look at that ruling, it really just talks about the ability to use the term race in college admissions. And so now universities are sort of shifting. They're not changing the objective. A lot of times the objective is staying the same, to diversify the candidate pool and diversify the student body, but they're having to change how they go about it and the words that they call it, in a nutshell. So with this DEI space, yes, there's a pretty coordinated attack on this concept of DEI, similar to critical race theory in an education setting. But here, it doesn't change the people who want to do this work and who really believe in the value of diversifying and the value of inclusion. And there's a lot of well-documented research about the benefits of, in terms of innovation, revenue, profit, everything with diverse teams. A Supreme Court ruling is not going to change whether that's a value of theirs or not. And so the people who come to me, the leaders who come to me for this work, are usually coming to me not because they have to do something, they're coming to me because they want to do something. And that doesn't change with the political or ideological pushback. So I would say that. What has changed, I think, is how do we future-proof these efforts? What terminology do we use so that it doesn't come under attack? So I've been using the term inclusion a lot more. So inclusive leadership, inclusive culture, those kinds of things, because that's shielded from any sort of controversy and debate around the idea of race or gender, which is unfortunate that we have to do that, but it's going back to like that example I said before of, look, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to make inclusive environments. That's what we're doing. So what I'm seeing is among my clients, and if anything more, I'm getting more calls from folks who are looking for new strategies and newer ways of approaching this space that are future-proofed.
That's one of my favorite words. Tony, it's all about future-proofing.
Future-proof.
Yes. Also, our colleague and wonderful friend, Ross Brand, in the comments is rallying against the Oxford comma. So there's a fight. Okay. There's a fight to the death in the comments. When you're a jet all the way.
we can agree to disagree and still be friends.
Yes, the comments are inclusive, Ross. Okay. For sure. Just a friendly reminder for anyone who's just joining us, this is the Stoned Fruit Roll-Up. We are live on YouTube at Stoned Fruit and also on my personal LinkedIn page every Thursday at high noon. That's 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and 5 o'clock for Jilly in merry old England. Melina, what's your jam? Like, who are the organizations that you really thrive with that are actually like not just checking a box, not just being like, we've done our DEI work, or be happy, who are actively reaching out to you and being like, look, we understand that the only way we can truly be competitive in a world that is changing as swiftly and as dramatically as the one we currently live in is to be creative rather than reactive. So that's going to mean a team that doesn't all think the same way. Help, raise the white flag. Who are those people that you are just like, you've got a perfect fit for? Maybe the size of the organization, the industry they're in, maybe they share some entrepreneurial character types or archetypes. Talk to me about your people.
Sure. So I view every organization and like every individual on this sort of spectrum. And on one extreme end of the spectrum, you have this is not a problem. This is not something we should spend any time or energy on. I don't want to hear it, right? That's one extreme. On the other extreme, you have super proactive, anti-racist, all the things, advocating for this, not going to stop, very ever present, right? So those are the two ends. Most people fall in between, and most organizations fall somewhere in between. And so what I say is I love working with leaders and individuals who are sort of like, I think we're ready to do something. We're not really sure what though. And maybe it's their first step, or they've had a couple steps into this DEI thing, but maybe they've had some stumbles and they're willing to do something, but they're a little scared and they're not sure. They're a little lost, but they're willing to put themselves out there and say, we want to do better. That's my sort of ideal client because they're curious and they just need someone to say, I got you. And do it in a way that's kind of fun. And so my ideal client has that, I would say, archetype or prototype. And then in terms of the size, I like working with smaller and medium-sized organizations because that's where I feel I can make the biggest difference, and where a lot of times they don't have a dedicated DEI person. They don't have sometimes they don't even have a dedicated HR person, right? So what I'm able to bring them just kind of goes a lot further because I am bringing not just DEI, I'm also bringing leadership and management training. I'm bringing a look at culture. And so I think it works really well and has the biggest impact on organizations that don't have any of that really, really structurally in place, because then I can come in and say, look, let's do it all together.
I love that. Tell me a story of when you did that for a real client. Yeah, and what was the outcome? No matter how small, it could be the smallest lever or the biggest out. Just tell me a story.
Yeah, so there's one that's been absolutely great that I've been working with for about a year. But what we did is we started with this culture audit. right? So they're about 100 people, so very much on the smaller end. We did the culture audit. And this is an organization that had done DEI work in the past, but they had someone in charge of DEI, and then that person left, and then it was the pandemic, and so they had all this momentum, but then they lost it because of pandemic and all these things, and then it knocked people's confidence in the organization's commitment to it. And then I came in to sort of refresh, step up their game, help them reestablish a foundation and reestablish trust with the employees that this is something that the leadership cared about. And so it was really fun to do that and have those conversations. So we started with the culture audit. From the culture audit came a clear desire from employees for more conversations about race in particular, and for more learning. And so with them, I worked really proactively to integrate conversations and provide tools and resources for tools around how to talk about race, and just integrating it really simply as 15 minutes in each staff meeting. Just carve out a little section to just have a conversation. So that was really beautiful to watch, because people were feeling just, finally, we could talk about this stuff. And I was helping equip the managers and leaders, who were mostly white in this instance, giving them a couple of tools for how they can facilitate these conversations, when you're not, quote unquote, the expert. So that was really fun. And then developed the sort of learning strategy. And so, yes, you see here workshops, which is a second of my 3 offerings, which is providing a practical, tangible learning. So it's not just, okay, an unconscious bias seminar that takes 6 hours and you walk away and then nothing ever happens. It's very much practical topics like, how do you run an inclusive meeting? How do you manage a hybrid team inclusively, right? Like very specific things with tools. And then the third product I offer, which I'm in the process of rolling out with this client, is what's called the P10E Workplace Platform. Now, this is like a Netflix of DEI and leadership training. This is my big baby, my main product, something I spent a year building.
That's all you've been talking about in the mastermind. So I'm really excited to
it's my only child. It's my big baby. So this is a digital platform. It's a product that gets sold like a subscription or a membership model. So an organization, typical example, is looking to provide support to its people on an ongoing basis. It's not just one-off workshops, because we know that doesn't work. And so this is a platform that allows organizations 24/7 access to micro-learning, short video-based teachings on what's a gender pronoun, and what's code switching mean, and is it Hispanic or Latinx? I'm really confused. All of that, plus resources learning that's super interactive and engaging and approachable. And so this is my solution. This is my answer to that question of, how do we equip people with the tools and resources and knowledge when they don't have a lot of time, when they don't have a lot of money, and when everyone is at a different stage in their journey. That's really important, because this is not a course where you go step by step by step by step and then you've become anti-racist. It's not what this is.
If only it were that easy.
Right? I got the certificate. It's not how it proves
it. I'm taking it with me to the bar everywhere I go.
Exactly. The idea is that, look, we're all at different stages in the journey within an organization. So how do you provide support to everybody where they are, instead of forcing everyone to go through specific lines of learning or training, where some people are way behind and some people are like, this is the 10th time I've had to do this. And so it's super interactive and constantly evolving. Like I mentioned, that language in this space is constantly evolving. This content is constantly evolving. So a great example is the Supreme Court hearing that came out. There are probably going to be more. And we need to have platforms that are able to respond in a timely manner to these things as they come up. So that's the beauty of the platform. It's interactive, it's digital, it's multimedia. It's fun. I think it's fun. And I pull together, the content is built by me and by different experts that I bring in to talk on specific topics. So I mentioned that grief expert that I had done a video with a couple of months ago. So that kind of content is on there. It's everything from DEI, leadership and management training, to wellness in the workplace.
Damn, girl, I love the Netflix of leadership training. Who exactly hires you?
Who hires me? Well, this is a brand new product, right? So the P20 platform. So it's actually rolled out just now this year. So
congratulations.
Thank you. And so who's hired me for the services I've done? It's really a range. So like I said, I would say smaller and medium-sized companies, bigger companies, big public companies that already have DEI and learning and development and all these things. A lot of times they're not engaging outside consultants as often for some of these things. So I really focus on medium and small size, anything from about, say my sweet spot is anything from 50 people to a couple thousand people, 10,000 people. It's probably in that range where you're just at this spot. And what I really like about working with outside organization is it's much easier to implement change, much faster to steer it in a new direction and implement new practices. So those are the kinds of organizations. And in terms of the sectors, I've really had a range. I've had nonprofit, a lot of nonprofits. I've had private sector, which is where I come from. Tech is a big one, where they're really trying to foster diversity and equity and inclusion. So, yeah.
Melina, that's hilarious. This is what happens. Like your brain gets full, and then you're like, "What? I have a thing."
Am I blowing your mind? Yeah.
No. Yes, you are. You're absolutely blowing my mind with these amazing ways that you've approached tackling a problem. That when you were in, the commercial real estate, when you were in this kind of like real estate moment, and you were just recognizing how broken work is for some people, and how other people aren't even aware of it, who could or could not maybe do something about it. So let's talk about it. And then flash forward 3 years later, and this is what's come of it. And I think you have a lot to be proud of. This is a tremendous build, and it's required you to go out on kind of a leap of faith that folks are willing to invest in being uncomfortable. Oh my God. That's a tagline.
Oh, I like that. Invest in being uncomfortable. Yeah, it's great, and it's I love it. I love working with people who are uncomfortable.
Well, speaking of uncomfortable, let's get you there.
Okay.
Where do you feel like it's not hitting for you? What's not maybe working with how you're marketing this? Maybe everything is working and you're like, Rebecca, I just want to come on here and show my
perfect.
thing.
No. Here's where it's not working for me. My network and my audience, I would say I have a great one, but it's all in my old space of commercial real estate. Now, unfortunately for my commercial real estate friends out there, that industry is quite behind. And it's one of the reasons why, what propelled me into this and why I continue to speak to that audience, because there's a lot of need for that. So I'll continue to do that. However, that's not my core customer, I'm afraid to say right now, because they're not ready to move forward. And I think they will be, and I'll be there when they are, but a lot of them are just not ready. So they're not in the curious stage yet. They're in the avoidance stage. So what I need to do is to take my work and my visibility and all that and really get it out to other industries and get it out to a wider audience, so that the people who I described as being my core customer see me and hear me and go, I need to call her. That's where it's not working for me right now, because I'm not, I don't think that I'm getting in front of them in the right way.
When you say in the right way, what do you mean?
I guess what I mean is I'm just not getting in front of them. Period.
What does Gill say?
Gill says she agrees. And it's about, visibility on the one hand. So I mentioned that before, and sort of expanding outside of just my LinkedIn network. So I did a lot of work last year being visible on LinkedIn. But these are algorithms that we're sort of subject to, and because my network is primarily real estate, so how can I branch out of that? So part of that is, being a podcast guest on podcasts that are outside of commercial real estate or have wider industry reach, growing my YouTube channel, which I'm doing a big push for this year, for a chance to reach a wider network. So those are two of the concrete things that she suggested, which I agree with.
I agree. How do you think your current messaging is landing with people who don't know you?
I think it's resonating. I think it resonates more with women, but I think that that's a part of a bias that exists anyways, that men tend to read books written by other men, or watch YouTubes, or follow Twitter accounts of other men. There's women tend to follow, and this is all statistics, I'm not making this up, that women tend to follow, for example, in social media, male and female accounts in equal measure, but men disproportionately only follow other men. And so there's this assumption that if you're a woman and you've written a book, or if you're a woman and you're talking about something, you're talking to other women. And I'm actually talking to a lot of men.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. And do you feel like your messaging communicates in a anything I say is going to sound like I'm on the gender binary. So I guess my question is, would if your ideal customer are men who are not used to listening to women right now, what is it that you think your messaging does that gets them to stop and look anyway? Who are they that it's still like, oh, okay, I don't normally listen to women, but this one's interesting?
I think the fact that my resume, so the fact that I came from commercial real estate, the fact that I ticked the box of having a very senior position, very respected position, multiple respected positions in a very well-known firm, tick the resume box on the universities I went to. I think, unfortunately in this space, it generates more credibility and respect in that sense. It's really funny. I've always loved languages. I mentioned earlier, I was a French major in college, and I speak about 3.5, 4 languages I forget. And that, for some reason, men are really like, oh, wow. I mean, that's great. I don't know why, but that's always something that's resonated with them. Like, I have my resume, or if I have my bio, and there'll be a little blurb about like other things about me. And I'll say, I speak 4 languages. And that's always a point of, they want to talk about it, or they're curious, or that hooks them. So I don't know why. I don't know what that means, but I take that to mean a little bit, as I think about it, and I hadn't thought about it before, that it's more of like the credentials that I have that seem to hook their attention.
White dudes in the comments, tell us why you would listen to somebody who wants to change the conversation about the workplace. And that might mean dismantling things in which you're comfortable. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear.
And the other thing I'll say about that is, I think, you posed the question is what attracts them to me as from a professional standpoint. The point where I really feel like I can engage with them is when we have the conversation, or when they see me interacting with another man and they see, oh, she's not attacking, she's not criticizing. So I think there's a visibility point there too, of they need to see, maybe I need to be more visible in how I interact with white men, for example, because it's not an attack by any means. And it's very much, I'm inviting you in. You want to play in the sandbox with me? Like, let's play. There's room for everybody here. Let's do it. Let's like toss some toys around.
Again, I do think it takes some real, you got to put up the mantle of safety. In order to you do. You have to, like, I do think that, like, cisgendered white dudes out there in the world do have a mantle of protection around irreproachability, and they have to take that off and not and have a leap of faith that it's not going to be unsafe for them. And that's a huge conversation.
Makes me feel like I need to have a series of like conversations with white men, right? And just have these live coaching calls. I'm not a coach, but have a live conversation with like, what makes you most uncomfortable? Let's talk about it.
I think that's really an interesting idea, and particularly because your whole shtick that I've been able to gather is really around, if I had a magic wand, I would normalize uncomfortable conversations, and then also have the results of those conversations change perspective and inform the way that we do things around here in a much more enlightened way, basically expanding your mind map. So I think it's a really interesting idea for your YouTube channel, and what a cool way to get clients. Because if you had a project that was like, you know, uncomfortable conversations with white guys, you know, kind of like your own between two ferns, and then invited people to that table, the folks who are willing to have that conversation, if they're within your kind of range of ideal people, that would open the door for you for client work with them.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, I guess it does exist, right? So there's a very famous project called Uncomfortable Conversations. And so, I'm missing the comments, but it looks really juicy.
I'm so sorry. Kathleen said, I would like to interact with white men less.
I understand that.
And then she does have a question. Do you ever find it intimidating and unsafe chatting with them and pointing out things they need to change? Because would they want to change? I would watch
this. Is a great question.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer that.
Kathleen, you did the thing, girl. Let's go over a little bit. I don't want to disrespect your time or any of the viewers. If you want to stick around, we're going to go a little bit over. Go ahead, girl. Go ahead, girl. Do your thing.
So here's the thing. I totally understand that sentiment because I was there. I was working with them and I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is too much. Like, I don't want to interact with any of these dudes. And here's the thing. I took my time away. I did my quote unquote healing, and I came back to this work with all my armor. And I say that to mean I'm constantly working and talking to women and people of color in these industries and corporate environments where they're exhausted from this and they're sick of having to deal with it. And it's not their torch to carry. They shouldn't have to. So it's my job. That's why I've sort of put myself forward as like the sacrificial lamb. It's like, I'll take it. I will have the uncomfortable conversations. I will deal with the pushback. I'm trained for that, so that all of you women and people of color with your day jobs can focus on your day jobs. You should not be expected to be DEI leaders in addition to your day job. That's something I see a lot. And instead of actually doing the work, you just create a volunteer committee, or you ask someone to lead something because they're the only woman and they must care about it, right? No.
And also, if I'm listening to Black women on TikTok, they're sick to death of having to be like the unofficial educator of everybody around them. That's an unfair ask, in my opinion.
It's super unfair. It's unpaid. It's unrecognized, and it's under-resourced. So I got this request all the time when I was a woman in commercial real estate, especially during 2020 and post 2020. It was okay. We need to have more diversity on the calls. Melina, how do we do that? Or we need more women represented in this group. Melina, where do we find them? And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that in addition to being the managing director of this business, and also the global head of that business, because you want me to do 2 senior level roles, that on top of that, you want me to be your DEI expert. Oh, interesting. Right? So like this assumption that because you're a woman or you're a person of color or you're XYZ, you must know how to do this work. Just because you've had problems doesn't mean you make a great psychologist. Like, that's not how this works.
Melina, that really came up with the conversation I mentioned earlier with Jen Griffin on Let's Fix Leadership, the podcast, in which like, guys, I'm not the expert on how to create a handicapped bathroom. I literally lost my hands and feet yesterday. Like, I'm being obviously glib, but I'm not the expert in that. We have to have these conversations together. Things have to change here. Like the insurance policy had to change. Their work policies had to change. She had no idea. Like, what's my capacity now? I don't know. I've never been a quadriplegic before. I don't know.
Yeah.
But to put the onus of that conversation on the people who are the most affected by it, who are already exhausted by other underpinnings and just kind of the society at large, is not only is it lazy, but it just inflames me with like, that is so skewed and disproportionate to the way that we should lead our organizations. That is, I'm here with you, girl. And I think I love that you were like, put it on my shoulders. I'm here to do the lift, which is really powerful.
Yeah.
We came to a place at the end of this conversation that actually surprised me. I really thought we were kind of like, okay, for, executive leadership who recognize that the future of business depends on their ability to innovate. Like, I thought that we'd kind of go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's deeper and more profound down a rabbit hole I wasn't expecting. So that's been very, very cool.
It's deep. It's deep. And I think one of my challenges or struggles is this is deep work, has deep roots. But I want to present it in a way that feels approachable. I keep using that term, approachable and accessible. So how can I embody and recognize and hold the fact that this is deep and emotional for a lot of people, and that I have a big mission in terms of like it's social justice in nature, it's anti-racist in nature, it's feminist in nature. It's all of these things, these big things. But I want to present it in a way that feels like little hinges swing big doors. I can do this. This isn't intimidating.
That's an interesting turn of phrase. I think it's also further complicated by how capitalism and white supremacy are happy bedfellows. So how do you unravel and deconstruct one without threatening the other? And capitalism is why corporate exists. So like that's a really that's deep, girl. So there's a lot to go into there.
There's a lot. But if I go down all the rabbit holes and talk about the capitalist superstructures and we're going to lose a whole lot of people. We're going to lose a whole lot of potential to change things. And so people aren't ready to have that conversation, and that's okay. Where are you? What conversation are you ready to have? And let's have it.
Yeah. Also, dudes don't like change, so that's another thing.
No comment.
No comment indeed. Kathleen wants us to know that this conversation gave her goosebumps. She loves your mission, and she just really so thankful that you volunteered as tribute. I volunteer as tribute.
I do.
She also wants to see everything that we said today turned into fabulous copy. Thanks for bringing it back around to what we're actually here to do today. Melina, originally when we got on the call, I was like, okay, let's just kind of get through it and I'll construct a positioning statement live and online, but I'd like to make another offer.
Okay.
Here's what I do normally when I have a client who's in front of me that we're doing this work, because this is where we start everything. There's not a single piece of copy that I write that doesn't start with a positioning statement. And the way that I create it is in this co-creation space of this discovery session that we did here, where I just ask you questions, we talk about the industry, and I get you talking, and then I take a bunch of notes. Then I come back around and I write 3 very different positioning statements that kind of come at it from different angles, essentially triangulating our possibilities for, how the brand is going to kind of breathe and become itself, live its best life, as it were. Mm-hmm. And then together we look at those 3 and we kind of identify what's the best of all of these statements. Is it a kind of what Jill calls a Frankenstein, where we kind of mash up some ideas from various different versions and create the perfect chef's kiss positioning statement. The rest of the things we really love that didn't make the cut kind of drop down into messaging buckets. And then that becomes the foundation for your marketing. Would you like to do that, go on that brand venture with me and go all the way and have me do 3 of them and come back around and do another session where we really look at the positioning of that and the messaging, and then you have kind of like white glove quality deliverable rather than we're here live coaching today?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you recommend.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah. I feel like there's more here to really discover and unpack. Like, when I do a position, it's like for blank, who need blank, we are the blank that delivers blank because only blank. So is the for part truly male leaders, or is the for part actually women and people of color and the world and folks with disability? We got to pick one though to position. So what I'd like to do is write a couple where we're kind of exploring for the future of the workplace, for male leaders who no longer want to be irrelevant, for females who are sick as shit of pulling the wagon on this stuff. Like, let's explore that and come back. I'm going to pass this out to you live. Why not? Could you do next week at the same time?
Let's have a look.
Let's look at your little calendar here. I've got some programming scheduled, but because actually, Melina, if we're going to do that, we should take this conversation offline. I'm in the air in Dallas next Thursday, but we could do a pre-recorded session.
Yeah.
So let's schedule that and then play it on Thursday. And the folks who are here today can then see the result of that.
Sounds good.
Are you into it?
I'm into it.
Okay, I'm into it too. We're going to end this live stream as we've kind of come a little bit over time. But before we do, I want to bring back your website up to the forefront here and let people have a chance to kind of get a sense for what it looks like. I've got the URL running at the banner at the bottom, so I encourage everyone to go to melinacordero.com. melinacordero.com for anyone listening to a future podcast, ? And then also please share the LinkedIn space with our girl Melina. Go and connect with her and check out her thought leadership. She also has a prolific YouTube channel, which I did not think in advance to bring up. So find it, folks. Well, those will be in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, and the newsletter.
And the newsletter. Oh, and the newsletter. Yeah. Where can folks find the newsletter here at the LinkedIn?
Everything is on there on LinkedIn where it says free P20 insights for leaders. You can sign up there and on my website.
Excellent. All right, Melina, I'm going to end this broadcast. Folks who stuck with us the whole way, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Ross Brand. This has been Stoned Fruit Roll-Up. We are here every Thursday on YouTube and also on my personal LinkedIn page at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next week, we're going to watch this all come to fruition in positioning and give Melina the words that she's been craving. Words that work. Words that work.
Words that work. Love it.
Indeed. Melina, thank you for being such a cheeky, delicious volunteer. I feel like I won the lottery today by learning more about you. And I can't wait to position this brand and give you something you can really grow into that also feels 100% you.
Thank you. I've never been described as delicious before, but I like it.
That's your new thing, girl.
I like it.
Your new thing. All right. I'm going to end the stream. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and watching. Stay tuned right here on this channel because in 15 minutes I'll be on the Stream Leader Report with Ross Brand, Rob Greenlee, and Claudia Santiago. I'm bringing a story to the table that's all about the 9-month world cruise. So if you want to see how TikTok sees it, stay tuned. All right.
Awesome.
And now